This discussion focuses on the celebration of the LGBTQ+ identities and cultures, including but not limited to the history and struggles of the LGBTQ+ rights movement. The panelists will be Carol Bullock, the Executive Director of the Pride Center of Staten Island, Casey Hankins, public school teacher and community activist, and Judge Matthew Titone, Staten Island's first openly gay elected official.
This is Conversations with Community Giants.
Ladies and gentlemen, I think we're live. I'm very excited. Grace, are you excited? I'm very excited.
You look like you're very excited to be up here with me. Shane DeMayo for the Staten Island Advance. Everyone tuning in on Facebook Live, thank you so much for joining us again. Very excited. The third time we're doing this. We have it right here. This is the third DEI conference, Conversations with Community Giants, celebrating Pride. We have an amazing thing to talk about here today. Our guests that are out here. Can we just get a round of applause for all three that are up here today? We're going to begin introducing them in a moment, but again, just to lay the grounds here, LGBTQ+ identities and culture, we're talking about equality and acceptance, community building, and the empowerment of individuals to express their true selves. Dr. Graceland Santos, take it away, please.
Thank you, Shane. Thank you. And thank you, everybody, for coming today. We are just ready to go and so excited, as Shane said. The Advance SI Live DEI Committee hopes this panel discussion series will inspire ways we can best represent the communities that we serve, identify opportunities for improvement regarding the LGBTQ+ community and their issues, and perhaps spark advocacy and policy change. We are joined today by our newsroom staff. I'm so happy to see everybody on a hot summer day here for this panel discussion. And this includes our DEI committee members, Jason Padron, who's heading up our technical operations, Felicia Torres, and I don't think that Kelly DeSantis is here, but she works hard all year long. And we are also joined by our Advance senior leadership, including Caroline Harrison, the president and CEO of Advance Local and publisher of the Advance and SI Live, Brian J. Leyline, our executive editor of the Advance and SI Live, and our Gail Dubin, our senior content director. So welcome to our senior leadership. I've asked Mrs. Harrison to say a few words, and so if you could come up and please welcome Caroline Harrison.
Well, Graceland, thank you for the invitation. I am really so proud to be here today, representing the Advance SI Live and Advance Local. And I want to thank you and the DEI committee for what you've done to gather this really imminent group of community leaders who have done so much to give voice to the LGBTQ plus community on Staten Island. And that is so important to us as an organization, to ensure that all members of the community have voice. And it's very much aligned with our mission at Advance Local to strengthen and empower our community. And I also want to make mention of the fact that we recently launched our second business resource group at Advance Local. Our first was intended for women to have a safe space and a voice where they could congregate. That business resource group, Advancing Women, has really taken off with several hundred members who gather on a fairly regular basis. Our second business resource group, Advance Pride, launched in June. And it, too, is focused on giving a safe space to the LGBTQ plus community and allies, and has really taken off already. So I think it's an important and safe space for Advance Local employees. I'm pleased that it has taken off, and I encourage you all to participate and help to strengthen that community. So with no further ado, let me turn it back to you. I'm looking forward to a great panel today, and thank you for organizing.
Well, all right. Thank you very much, Caroline. Appreciate that. Let's start introducing some of today's panelists. Three of them from Staten Island, very prominent in the LGBTQ plus community: Carol Bullock, Casey Hankins, and the Judge Matthew Titone. Thank you so much for being here, all three of you. We're going to go one by one, do some bios right now. First off, for those who do not know, Carol Bullock is the Executive Director of the Pride Center of Staten Island since 2017, leads the staff in upholding its values, community, brave space, inclusion, allyship, relationship building, and development. Carol's an active member of many groups advocating for equality and has been instrumental in creating visibility and community support for the center, as well as advocating federally, statewide, and locally. Round of applause for Carol, please.
Welcome, Carol Bullock. Definitely a community giant. We're so pleased to have you here. Next up, another community giant and a fierce advocate for the LGBTQ plus committee, Judge Matthew Titone. Judge Titone is Staten Island's first openly gay elected official, elected to the bench as the surrogate of Richmond County in 2018. He lives on the North Shore with his spouse, Josue, who I know is Josh. He has done pro bono work for the Staten Island AIDS Task Force and Project Hospitality. Judge Titone, until his election to the New York State Assembly in 2007, provided pro bono services to those who couldn't afford legal representation. He served on the board of the Community Health Action of Staten Island and on the Board of Legal Services of New York. His civic participation includes, but it's not limited to, because we'd be here all day if we spoke on all of them, it includes Snug Harbor Cultural Center, where he served on the executive committee, as well as interim president and CEO. Please welcome Judge Titone. Thank you for being with us.
And last, certainly not least, Casey Hankins, sitting over there at the end, community activist on Staten Island, working to build the LGBTQ plus visibility and representation. Proud out public school teacher, Casey began his activism through Young Democrats of Richmond County and the Staten Island Democratic Party, ensuring that the LGBTQ plus issues are being prioritized by our leaders. Casey is the executive VP of the Stonewall Democrats NYC and a leading voice in the fight to get the Pride Center of Staten Island to march in the Staten Island St. Patrick's Day Parade, organizing the annual Rainbow Run before the parade, working to draw media attention, and probably the tallest person in the room. Casey, thank you so much.
Okay, so welcome everybody, and thank you again. Let's just get right into it because we only have an hour and we have so much to cover. So I'd like to kick off the question portion of this panel discussion with a very generalized, broad question, which probably has so many nuanced meanings to all three of you. What does pride mean to you?
All righty. Well, again, I want to say thank you for having us here today and helping create more visibility for our community. Pride for me, everyone talks about being your authentic self, but what does that really feel like or mean? And for me, it's a freedom. I remember before I came out, I was very closed off. I was, you end up lying to people about certain things that you're doing or where you're going or who you're with. And once I actually came out, there was a sense of freedom that I could just be me and share with everyone exactly what I was doing, how I felt, and so it's freedom for me.
It's a great question, thank you. But first of all, thank you all for hosting us. We really do appreciate it. And I do want to really strongly thank you for being allies, because you guys as allies are one of our most powerful and effective voices in moving the LGBTQ plus community forward. So thank you for that. So pride for me means being equal, being unequivocally equal to everyone else, not second class or in the back of the bus or anything like that, but being absolutely equal with the way we are treated by the law and in cultural respects. So pride for me, and to Carol's point, is being your authentic self, keeping in mind that many of us grew up in the closet. We had to basically grow up being chameleons. And then when we finally come out, we then get the opportunity to figure out, oh, well, here I am. I'm an adult now, but who am I really? So it's being able to answer that question, who am I truly to myself and to others, that's really where pride is born. So I think it's more about pride being a verb than it is an adjective.
All right, I guess me last. First, I want to say thank you so much for having me on this panel. It's such an honor to be sitting here with these two incredible leaders in the LGBT community, and I really appreciate you acknowledging the work that I've done on Staten Island and, making sure that there's space for our voices. Pride to me is about looking backwards and looking forwards. Pride is about how I can look at the month of June and I can spend time reflecting on what took us to get here. What did it take for us to be able to be out and be public? What did it take for the Advance to do a panel like this? What came before this that allowed us to have this today? And then it's also about looking forward. What does the LGBT community need? What does the most marginalized members of the LGBT community need in order to be thriving in our community and be thriving as members of our society? And how can we make sure that they're the most protected, they're protected and taken care of in the future? And then also Pride is about community. I think it's really important that we come together as queer people and spend time in our safe spaces, resting, celebrating, and just being able to be our authentic selves and not having to be out in a world where sometimes we're, like Carol said, like being a chameleon, hiding ourselves, changing ourselves, finding space to just be our authentic selves with our people and really just finding comfort in that during the month of June.
Casey, we'll start with you and we'll just start going down the line like that. We also want to know if you could share an experience where being the first LGBTQ plus person in a particular role or a position had a significant impact on you in the community.
So it's interesting to be asked this question. It's hard for me to name that because I came out in a world, like I said, where people before me created a space that I really wasn't the first in almost any space. I've worked in schools where I've come into the school and queer teachers have, come to me to take care of me and show me the ropes of what that means. And I've been around so many different people that have laid the groundwork in front of me. I think an experience that I had that I was the first was in my growing up in my church. I was in the closet in church. I was a very active member of a youth ministry, and I learned so much from that youth ministry about what it means to give back to my community, what it means to be a member of a community, what it means to help the most vulnerable around us. And then when I came out, I had that zonked away from me, and everything just became about, oh, well, I'm gay. So I was taught both so many things that are important to who I am as a person, and then I was also taught to hate myself. And so that was a really interesting experience, and it caused me to run away from the church from the age of 17 until today. And, it's a very interesting experience. But yeah, I think that I'm very lucky that I haven't been the first in a lot of spaces. And I hope that, the visibility that I can create is less people have to be the first where they go places.
Well. Back in 2006, when I first ran for public office, I did not know that I would someday become the very first openly gay elected official on Staten Island. For me, it was a little bit jarring because many people did not know I was gay, and they thought that, running for political office, when the Advance wrote a story about, private life and our, personal affections, I happened to have, a boyfriend at the time. I thought I was out of the closet until that story hit, and that's when I found out, oh, now I'm out of the closet. Really out of the closet. So I think being the first, with it does come responsibility as well. It means, first of all, that you're not owned by the queer community, and you really have a responsibility to yourself first and foremost. But there's also the responsibility to the constituency that I represented at the time as an assembly member. So while it was really cool to be the first and the only for quite some time, it was eye-opening in the sense that there were certain factors, things that I had not really thought about politically because I was not running as the gay candidate on gay issues. I was running, for North Shore issues of Staten Island. So there's a learning curve. There's definitely a learning curve, and then it's like I said, a responsibility, but it also was a real true privilege and honor being the first openly gay surrogate judge in New York State. Has its points to it, but it's a seat at the table. It's a seat at the table no matter what career path that it is, what profession. It's a seat at the table, which is important, whether it's me, Carol, or Casey, or any other young kid watching this today who's thinking, well, I want to be this, and even if I turn out to be the first openly queer person to do it, it's a seat at the table, which is so important to every community.
Yeah, I would agree with Matt. So, and similar to Casey, I am not the first executive director of the Pride Center of Staten Island. I'm the second. But when I did come on board and start to figure out what a not-for-profit was at the time, I started to insert myself and really go into networking groups, all kinds of anything I was invited to, I went. And knowing that I was the first, executive director of the Pride Center of Staten Island who was there representing the center and the community. And really, to Matt's point, just educating. That's how I looked at every opportunity, whether I was going to meet with an elected for the first time or I was going to speak in front of various different groups. It was my opportunity to educate, and that's how I looked at every single thing, and I still do to this day.
Thank you. Our next question is very pertinent to our business. How do our panelists think media representation of the LGBTQ plus individuals has evolved over the years? And what would you personally like to see in terms of changes or improvements? What do you like and what do you dislike? And while you're thinking about that, because that's a lot, I just invite everybody on Facebook Live, if you have any comments or questions for our panelists, please get them in there, and then we'll be able to maybe pick some. And of course, our newsroom staff, if you have anything, please just hop in at any moment. Do you need me to repeat the question?
No, that's okay. Social media said it all right there for me. I think it's a double-edged sword. I see so much more now. Even during Pride Month, I saw some very empowering and inspiring, things out there on every platform that gave me a really good feeling about if a youth was thinking about coming out right now and felt what I'm feeling, they would know there's resources and a community out there to support them. And then I would, scroll through and come across something that I just went, oh man, that just killed that vibe. So again, I think it's a double-edged sword. I think it's like anything else. There's a lot of misinformation out there. I think, people are very emboldened right now to show their hate. And I see that, I hear it, especially when someone's behind a laptop, right? They feel like they can say whatever they want. And I don't think they think about the impact that has, especially on our youth. I go back to that because, the suicide rates are extremely high amongst the LGBTQIA plus youth. And they are getting hit with this. And especially during COVID, think about that. Everybody felt isolated. If you were not out, especially as a youth, and you were isolated with your family, what are you doing all day? You're on social media. And hopefully you're seeing some of the inspiring things, but they're coming across some of the very hurtful things as well. So that's kind of my take on it.
Sure, it's an interesting question, and it's a question I think that could be taken in context of, first, what was a media representation of gay people prior to social media, and what is it now after social media? Prior to social media, when I was growing up, many, many years ago, gay people were represented as stereotypes, either with a perverse mental illness or the flamboyant hairdressing queen. So that was it. Now I think more and more you're seeing, now that we have artists who are actually writing about their experiences, actors who are portraying gay people more accurately as everyday people, we're seeing more positive. And we have organizations like GLAAD that really keeps track of the media portrayal of gay people in film, television, radio, things of that nature. But I think most importantly that it's been, to Carol's point, a double-edged sword, that with social media where people can participate in the conversation without filter, it's a blessing and a curse all at once. But I think overall the media representation of the gay community has shifted to a by far more positive attitude and a far more honest representation of who the gay community truly is. And we could be just anyone, anyone. And I think that's really the point, I hope.
Yeah, I think to Matt's point, when I was growing up, everything was a stereotype in the media of how LGBT people were portrayed. Like I grew up on like Rent, and like all the queer people were dying of AIDS in Rent. And that was like the entire experience of what we were seeing. And I think that like trauma and exposing only trauma is a really negative impact that media has had on the LGBT community for quite some time. I think that by only showcasing the negative things that happen to queer people or the hardships that queer people go through, it teaches you that being queer is not an enjoyable experience, when in fact there's so much positivity to being a member of the LGBT community. And I think that it's really important to the people in this room, as well as, all media, both fictional media and, newsrooms and everything, to celebrate queer joy. The show Schitt's Creek aired a few years back is like my favorite show on television because, spoiler alert, the queer characters end up okay. And the trauma isn't imposed on them for being queer. They go through a lot, but it isn't because they're queer. And at no point do they experience homophobia. No, they just get to experience life as a queer person in a positive way. And then another way, I think the Advance this past June and for the previous years has done a really good job of like throughout June, like showcasing different organizations. Like they showcased the owners of Steiny's Pub, where the LGBT owners of Steiny's Pub, that they are doing a great job. They purchased a bar and they're building Steiny's back up to what it was. And like, it's a beautiful thing. And like, that's just a beautiful story of like queer success and queer joy. I think we just need so much more of that. And of course we have to highlight the negatives and the challenges that we face as a queer community, but also like the love and the joy that exists with us. Like it should be equally balanced, I think, in the media.
Schitt's Creek is a fantastic show. My wife put me onto that. It's a fantastic show. It's a great show. To build off of media representation, private businesses or businesses in general, how do you think workplaces can better support the mental health, well-being, and safety of members in the community?
The Pride Center of Staten Island. I think it's important to create inclusive space, and simple things can make it so much more welcoming, whether it's gender-neutral bathrooms or just having a flag, right? I'm asked to go into a lot of organizations, hospitals, and really talk about how they can make someone walking through their front door feel more comfortable. Because, FYI, if a transgender individual goes into a hospital and the wrong pronouns are used, the chance of them going back for the care they need are like nil, right? And they need that care. So it's so important, just simple things, like I said, like a flag, using the right pronouns. Ask someone what pronouns they even use, right? I go into a lot of meetings, I go into businesses, it doesn't even dawn on them to ask what my pronouns are. She, her, hers, by the way. But just asking all of their employees, what's your pronouns? Just so they make sure that they are cognizant of those types of things to make them feel more comfortable.
And you can always ask me what my adjectives are. Within the court system, and I think the courts in New York State have been doing an extraordinary job with DEI, particularly with the LGBTQ plus community. But what the real need where I see on an everyday is with guardians. When we're appointing people to be guardians over mentally ill persons or developmentally disabled persons, it's important that we connect them to people who understand who they are and what trans might mean to them and to you. So there's that aspect, which I think while we're experiencing growing pains and we have a ways to go, at least the courts in New York State are really addressing those issues and are looking to really ensure that court users are comfortable with the law that is being imposed upon them, with the people that are imposing those laws. And within staff itself, it's become a great place to work for any marginalized group. So it's something, if you're looking for work, you should check out NewYorkStateCourts.com. but really, I think it's a matter of being proactive and really sticking to that education and working towards a goal, which is a common goal.
I think for me, I think the answer is leadership. I think that queer people deserve a seat at the highest, at the C-suite. They deserve a position of power within any organization. If you're looking at an organization with 10, 12, 15 people at a leadership level and none of them are queer, what experiences are being missed out in the organization? And allies can have the best intentions in the world, but their lived experience are not the same as the lived experience of queer people. And I think that making sure that queer people are present in decision making is really important to making sure that queer people are safe and accepted in the spaces that they are. And then like queer people in leadership, Judge Tatone was the first LGBT elected official in Staten Island. And then he went to Albany and he brought that lived experience with him. Now today, one of the great honors of my life was I was able to volunteer on Judge Tatone's campaign for judge. And I know now that when Staten Islanders show up in front of that court and a decision's being made on whether or not they should approve the adoption of a kid, we now know that if they're in front of Matt, we know that Matt's lived experience says he knows that they're capable, that these parents are able to raise his family. And you don't know what other people like that. Having that experience in the courtroom or having that experience at any level is so valuable to changing the narrative that goes on in any institution.
Thanks for that help.
Thank you. Thank you for those great answers. Our next question is kind of in keeping with the theme that we've been speaking on. There are so many young people on Staten Island and beyond who are still in the closet, and they're tortured, and they're confused, and they're mostly scared. So I know from a personal experience, my children who are 20, and 24, but the twins, they had an experience in the past few years where they've had very close friends who've come to them, really tortured and kind of lost about what to do and where to go because they didn't feel that they could go to their parents because there was fear in that subject in their household. So what do you recommend for the young people? I know the three of you are great advocates for young people in the LGBTQ plus community on Staten Island. What do you recommend that they do? What can we do in the media or in the community to reach out to these young people in the high school level, in the college level, or just in general to empower them and to help them so they're less afraid?
Recognize that coming out is a profoundly personal experience for everyone, and there is no one-size-fits-all. Every individual, just like we have our own fingerprints, we have our own journeys, gay or straight. Coming out, as I indicated earlier, you kind of grow up being this chameleon trying to fit in to what other people have expectations of you, and trying to conform to those so that you're not rejected or feel that you are rejected. I think one of the most important things that we can do and continue to do is to call out hate when we see it, ensure that there are safe places for our young people to go and resources for them to have, like the Pride Center, like our schools, like this paper, who does some really great work on promoting the LGBTQ plus community in a very positive light. But also think about, just hanging the pride flag. My husband and I hang a pride flag at our home in every June. Sometimes we keep it up late, more than that. But we do it not only to let our neighbors know that we're gay. And I hate when people say, well, I don't mind gay people, but why does it have to be in our face all the time? And I want to remind those people that it's not about your face. It's about others. And there's a young person in our neighborhood that we've seen since he or she's been 2 or 3 years old, and they're growing up to be their authentic self. And they're probably around 12, 13 now. And we hang that flag up, not for ourselves, but for that kid. When they walk by our house, I want them to feel safe in their own neighborhood. So it's not just about my pride flag. It's about signaling to others that this is a safe place for you to grow up. And so I think one of the things, once again, is knowing what the resources are and directing that young person to those resources.
Yeah, obviously Pride Center of Staten Island, again, because we have such great programming, and we can help them navigate that experience that they're going through. And we also have support groups for friends and family to come in and think about how they can support their loved one as well. I think when we talk about youth, I could probably fill up the rest of this time because hate is learned. Our youth are so incredibly important. I talked about suicide rates. The suicide rates among LGBTQIA plus youth are it's the number one cause of death of those particular youth. And right now, one LGBTQIA youth every 45 seconds across the U.S. attempts suicide. Doesn't mean they're successful, but they are attempting. So that's a scary statistic when you think about that. They're 4 times more likely to attempt suicide than their peers. So again, I could continue on with this, but I think that we go in, we have an education and outreach team that goes into our schools. We do a lot of training. We incorporate anti-bullying into that. And we try to get them to understand that the person next to you is your friend still. They're a person. And I like to think that we hopefully change some perspectives there. But I also think that there are other organizations. As a matter of fact, I'll give you a quick one. I was just on a panel not too long ago at the JCC in partnership with Illuminart. And they had youth act out different scenarios of hate, hate scenarios, whether it be against LGBTQIA or any other marginalized community. And the most impactful thing for me at the end of that was when they were talking to the youth about their experience in acting out these scenarios. And one of the individuals said, "I'm not a part of the LGBTQIA plus community, but I just portrayed a transgendered individual, and I feel horrible the way I was treated. Like it put them in their shoes. And I know this youth walked away with such a different attitude on how they will react if they see something or, supporting people that they know. So anything we can do with our youth and get in there to make them understand what someone else may be going through, I think is so incredibly important. But I will say on a positive note, during the St. Patrick's Day Parade, the first time some of those youth bands dropped out, they were asked by their principal, "Do you still want to march? Because you can't wear that little rainbow pin. Do you want to take that off and march?" And they dropped out. Band after band dropped out because whether they were a part of that community or not, they understood that someone right next to them may be. So there's hope out there.
Yeah, I think when it comes to young people, I think representation is everything. I think that seeing a successful, happy queer adult in their life makes them see a path for themselves to being a successful, happy queer adult in their life. And I think that, when it comes to protecting youth, like we have laws in the schools that protect youth, but it still requires that people, whether it's in a school or community center, the Pride Center of Staten Island, or anywhere else, that like kids have the protection and understanding that they can go to someone who's a safe adult. They can go to someone, and whether it's like wearing this little pin around school all day, or whether it's, having a sign in your classroom that says it's a safe space, or having Matt's flag outside his house that lets his neighbors know that he's a safe neighbor for them, is really, really important for children to see. And I think that creates the biggest difference. I think how I regularly think about how different my life would be if I had just one queer teacher. Like if I just had one out queer teacher in my lifetime, how different would my life be today? How much more would I have loved myself at 17 years old than I did? Because at the time I thought I was completely alone. So I think having that is so important. And we've made so much strides with that in some ways within the queer community, within like our society. But I also think that like some of the most marginalized queer people are left behind, which is a really hard thing. When you go into spaces where the immigrant community and different communities that have different relationships with the LGBT community can be really hard on kids, because now kids are at an intersection between their culture and being queer and what that means. And I think the best way to overcome that is for our kids' lives to really be what we say in education is a mirror and a window into other cultures, right? Every single child should be exposed to many different cultures, whether it's their own culture being reflected to them in their curriculum that they're learning from, or it's another culture that they can see a window into and be experienced, so that we all learn the similarities and differences between our cultures, and how it all comes back to love and making sure that we all care for each other, and how we're all making sure that, every space can be a safe space for kids.
Can I just add to, like, going back to the questions, what can we do for the kids? Not too long ago, the Staten Island Children's Museum hosted Drag Queen Story Hour, and people lost their minds, completely lost their minds. Their heads exploded, and much of it was done for attention and clickbait. And the people who were protesting this had no idea what Drag Queen Story Time is. That they really confused that with a drag show that you would see, at 1 o'clock in the morning, in a bar that has entertainment. And you're absolutely right. A drag show is not appropriate for children. But Drag Queen Story Time truly is. And we should be calling that out. When we see that, what happened on Staten Island, what happens to the Staten Island Children's Museum, it is inexcusable, because it was really driven by ignorance and just pure fear and hate, and much of it done simply for clickbait, simply to garner attention to themselves as a cultural person running around Staten Island. So when we see things like that, we should be calling it out and not letting those who ruined it. First of all, you have the absolute right, unequivocal right, to mind your own business, right? You should exercise that, particularly when it comes to other people's children. If I'm a parent taking my kid to Drag Queen Story Time, that's none of your effing business. Stay out of my family. So we need to be calling things like that out, and we should be encouraging more things like Drag Queen Story Time, which do teach diversity and inclusion. And it's not grooming, it's not indoctrination. It's just this big, sparkly, girly clown reading nice stories about inclusion. So, get real and get educated.
And if I could add to that, who was the most scared that day? The kids who were showing up for it. It was really horrifying to try to get them in as quickly as we could and keep them happy and make them feel safe. So I agree with exactly what you said, Matt.
I think you both just touched on a perfect segue to the next question that we had, where it's a bias in the community that leads to outrage and causes a scene like that. We're hoping, and again, it's an unfortunate question, that all three of you can share maybe a time in your lives where discrimination or bias led to a really negative impact for you, and how you met that maybe with positivity, and how the youth can meet it with positivity going forward if they encounter something like that.
Where should I begin? Well, the most visible, I think, is obviously the St. Patrick's Day Parade, right? We are LGBTQIA plus groups are excluded from even attempting to apply to march in the parade, which has a long-standing history on Staten Island. And that, to me, is probably the most visible discrimination that happens every single year. And the way I am personally treated, I have to tell you, as much as I mentally prepare, I walk out of there and I've just done, 10 rounds with Mike Tyson. It's a mental thing that's very hard to prepare for. It is exhausting. But you asked about how to, turn it positive. And I think that what we've done throughout the years has made it so visible and gotten so much community support around this that people are like, what? Or, I feel like that day that we marched down Forest Avenue for the Better Parade, as I like to call it, I felt so much support and love. People were crying on the sides. So that's how, just gaining support, educating. I think Matt talked about allies, educating everyone on, here's an example of discrimination. What are you gonna do about it? Are you going to support us? Or are you going to turn a blind eye? Or are you going to support them? And I think that through a lot of conversations, we've been able to garner a lot of community support. I will mention one other thing, which, we get a lot of negative correspondence, if you will. I've received numerous letters that are just awful and very hateful, and I take it and I try to protect my team and my participants at the center from that, right? And then I go to all my support friends and I'm like, oh my God, I have to tell you about what just happened. And so I think understanding the positive I can take out of those disgusting, vile letters that I get is that knowing it's still there. We have to continue to educate and, fight for equality, because there's still people out there who are bold enough to send disgusting stuff like that. I don't know if that's a positive.
Just a little inside baseball. Carol and I are very close friends, so it's just like, she'll be like, oh, look at this letter I got today. I was like, oh, yeah, well, I'll raise you that letter. Check out this one. But I think when we talk about moving forward, I cannot stress this stuff. The Staten Island Advance has been an extraordinarily good friend and ally to the LGBT community, and how grateful we are to it. So the editorials that you've written on the parade have been eye-opening, even for myself as someone who's there, living it. So keep doing what you're doing. But again, when we see the things like people losing their minds over drag queen story time, it's an opportunity for you to really get the word out. Well, what does it mean? What are you truly upset about? Do you even know what you're upset about? And 9 times out of 10, no, they don't. No, they don't. So you guys have been doing a really great service to the community, educating, and I would just say keep it up, keep it up, keep it up, and thank you.
Yeah, so to go back to the question, and I'm going to get on St. Patrick's Day also, because it's, as I joke, Forest Avenue is the hill I will die on. So I remember when I first learned of the discrimination against the Pride Center in the St. Patrick's Day Parade, and this was maybe like 9 years ago. It was before Carol was at the Pride Center. And we were all just really mad about it, and there was like nothing to do, and there was like no one that wanted to do anything about it, and everyone was like, just let it be. But for me, I'm looking at this saying, this is a visibility problem. I go back to visibility is the number one thing that helps queer kids, and you're telling me now that we can't have any visibility for all those little Catholic kids that are seeing this thing that, like, I was a little Catholic kid that never saw queer people, and just seeing that parade and then publicly excluding it. And there was like write-ups in the Advance about it that were like, well, Pride Center's not welcomed here again, and we'll see you next year for the same story. And I remember, so we got 8 of us together and we dressed up, we snuck into the Forest Avenue Mile, and we all wore different colors, and we ran down the parade route in a rainbow formation. And I remember that day, I went to go to Jody's beforehand to galvanize support from, the local leadership that all kikis at Jody's on St. Patrick's Day. And they wouldn't let me in the door because I had rainbow suspenders on. They would not let me in the door. Now, mind you, I'm looking at a friend of mine saying, let me in. Like, what? No, let me in. And they did not let me through that door. And it stuck with me so much because these are people that are allies to the community. These are leaders that are allies to the community. And we ran down that year and we got it was 8 of us and we got a little attention. The next year, about 75 of us ran. The following year, well over 100 ran. And we built that run from 7 of us to a huge group. This year at Jody's, Carol gave a speech. And it's just such a difference of what time can do and how the pendulum swings and how you move narratives. And that's the whole thing. So whatever the discrimination is, you have to move narratives. The organization ACT UP, they fought against the U.S. government's ignoring of the AIDS crisis. And at the time, that was the mechanism used AIDS was the big mechanism used to discriminate against LGBT people. Then it became family values. And there's always something that they're trying to discriminate against LGBT people. Today, it's trans people and drag queens. They're the new target. And at every time we see something like that, we have to meet it with an equal and opposite force, a showing of love, a showing of representation, because we can't let those things slip through the cracks. And I'll just say that it also takes allyship. My first year as an educator, I had a kid try to leave my class, didn't want a gay teacher. And a school leader at my school took the phone call from the parent and said, you want to take your kid out of one of my best math teachers' class? Now, I was not one of the best math teachers in the school at the time, but she and my school leader said, no, we're not, no. If you really want to fight it, but no. And that kid stayed in my class the whole year. And by the end of the year, we had a very good relationship. And that is important because that changed that kid's mind and we broke a cycle there. And that's where representation comes down to. It's always about representation.
Amazing feedback from all 3 of you right there. I just want to remind everyone on the Facebook Live, if you're watching right now, it's Conversations with Community Giants. We only got about 10, 15 minutes left. I want everyone in the room to know we would love to get some questions from everyone soon also. We got a few questions left we want to ask them. And Gracelyn, it's on you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Shane. The next question I'd like to pose to our panelists is one of a more personal nature. And I think that I want to get a little bit more personal because it might resonate with people watching, people out there who might need some empowerment and just who needs that extra shot of listening to other people's stories about coming out. So for the 3 of you, if you are willing and you don't have to answer, instead you can answer about who was the greatest ally in your lives personally and who helped you come out and be your authentic selves. Because I know Judge Titone at the top of the hour touched on it and about being a chameleon and how difficult that must be. So if our panelists can speak to your coming out stories if you want, or the most influential people in your lives that empowered you to be your authentic selves.
I wish I put the mic down. I don't want to go first. So I'll tell you my coming out story first. I was leaving a family party and a very good family friend of ours who I've known since I was born, her mom babysat me. I was very close with her my whole life. For some reason, when I was leaving that night, she grabbed my hand and she was like, if you ever need anything, call me. And at 2:00 in the morning that night, I picked up my phone and I called her. And I said, Kelly, I'm gay. And it was just such a funny thing because it was not intentional or anything, but it was one of those things that and when I tell you, it was that just created a domino effect. And I ended up staying in the closet mostly through the rest of high school. I wasn't stupid enough to come out in my high school and deal with the trauma that would have been at the time, it's hard to say that out loud, but realism's important. And I was like, I'm a pretty smart guy and I'm not dealing with that. That's not happening. And then I think that I don't know if this is the answer you want, but the greatest allies in my life are the queer people that laid the tracks before me. To me, they're the greatest allies in my life. And I understand that we of course need allyship from the whole community and everyone. But for me personally, the experience, learning the experiences of LGBT people that came before me is so important. I have this coworker at my school who's getting closer to retirement now. Maybe not too close, but and he like took me under his wing and showed me the ropes of how to be an out teacher while also, making sure, knowing I was going to face homophobia in schools and things like that. And it was just people like that, I think, are really who have allowed me to be the person that I am today. So I think that yeah. And then also, not for nothing, these two are the track that they've laid on Staten Island is so important. And they're really the biggest allies, I think, that I've had in my life.
Thank you. It's a hard question. Again, going back to what I said earlier, coming out is a profoundly personal experience, and there is no one-size-fits-all. I think the most impactful for me actually has been my family. Because while initially I grew up running away from coming out to my parents, at the end of the day, it was my family, my sisters, my brother who supported me the most when I came out. It was a hard road to initially, but at the end of the day, it was great. And I just wanted to even talk about my dad for a moment, who had this incredible arc professionally and personally. He grew up at a time when, gay people were, again, either mentally ill or hairdressers, flamboyant hairdressers. So for him to start seeing then the friends that I were bringing home to hang out and stuff, and this one's a fireman, this one's a detective, this one's a carpenter, my husband's a mason, things like that. And he started asking, well, is this one gay? Is that one gay? I was like, yeah. Oh, do you think he could fix the windows? So, he went from a very, what people would think would be very closed-minded to a very, very open-minded, to the point where he wrote the decision that said that, gay people living together are, under state law, to be considered a family as defined by state law. So I think family, for me personally, it's been, although initially a rough road, at the end of the day, family.
Yeah, mine was family as well. I was really close with my sister and with my mom. My mom and I had just gone on vacation for 3 weeks together. And I thought one of us wouldn't come back, but we both did. Very close with them, although there was a part of me that they didn't know about. They didn't know any of this. And I have a brother as well who I was not very close with, because I would hear him use slurs and make inappropriate jokes. And inside, I would just cringe, but I would just try to ignore it. He was the first one I came out to. I just was like, let's take it on. Let's just go for this. And I remember it's a very emotional thing when you put yourself back there, but telling him, and I could just see him probably rewinding the tape and going, wow, I probably shouldn't have said that or whatever. And just immediately, I love you, no matter what. He's one of my biggest allies right now. Changed overnight, by the way. He was very sensitive to what he said. It was very impactful. And then, of course, afterwards, I told the other two, and they're like, why would you tell your brother first and not us? It became this whole thing that they were mad. But anyway, but it took some time. And I think one of the things that we think about when we come out is we tell someone and we expect them to just, oh, okay, no problem. My mom, I expected her overnight to just accept the fact that I was gay. And here I was, it took me 30-some years to, digest that and come to terms with it. So I think allowing people time to figure out how they want to process it and then be able to support you is important. But the one thing my wife and I talk about all the time, once we come out the rest of our lives. If I go to a new dentist, I go to a new doctor, We are always coming out. I go to a networking event. What's your husband do? Well, she is awesome. So it's a constant thing. And I think that once you do it, you have to realize the floodgates are kind of open at that point. Sure.
Yeah, just to Carol's point about how we come out over and over and over again throughout our lives, like that's a really important thing, I think, for people to hear. Because a lot of people think it's like you flip a switch and the light's on in the closet now and everybody know. And that's not true. It depends very much on how you present. And like some of the most marginalized people in the queer community can't closet themselves, where I can pretty simply lower my voice and walk into a space and I can closet myself fairly easily. So it's a very different experience for many people. And I've dealt with throughout my career a lot of people coming out to me, young adults coming out to me. And my first question is always, are you safe? And what would be the impact of you coming out to other people? That is always my first question. And so many people kind of are like, it's 2024, Ellen's on TV, it gets better, like that kind of thing. And like, I think we as a society and a community really need to like grasp the fact that like that is not the lived experience of so many children. The amount of times I've had to like say to a kid, like, you have a year and a half until you are out of school and can move out. And if you're going to harm your own life for the next year and a half, or it's going to be bad for you, you might have to wait. And how disgusting I feel saying that is like, it hurts. It like hurts to have to say that to a kid. But I also know the lived experience of what like the other side of that could be so much worse. And I've had to have some really hard conversations with kids about like, like what is the, like, are you sure you're making sure that you're safe? And it's a very hard thing. It's a very hard thing for kids to grapple with. And I think that coming out over and over again throughout our whole lives is really a journey that we go on, and we get better at it. But sometimes it's easier just to like wear a rainbow. Like I love when I have like little rainbow backpack on or my suspenders, because I don't have to tell you, that kind of thing.
Last question from me before we open it up to a few questions here in the room, and I like adding a positive note at the end. For me, one of my favorite photos that I was ever able to take my entire career here at the Staten Island Advance was Pride Center marching, second parade. I felt something right there. I was like, this is huge. This is it. Give me chills talking about it right now. Anyone up here, please, real simple. You step out onto the street that day, you're about to march. What's it like?
We were next to each other.
All right, so I'm the one in the room that was there from day one with this parade 12, 13 years ago. Carol inherited it when she became the executive director, and late to the game, but you did a great job. And I think really at that point when Casey was doing the Rainbow Run, that's when the politics really started to show. But Shane, stepping out on that parade with Carol, with Casey, was exhilarating. It was absolutely exhilarating. I can't describe it. We had tears in our eyes. I'm not going to lie. You work hard for something for so long, and then the response from the people on Forest Avenue and the businesses was just overwhelming. And I wish every day could be that happy for all communities, but it was just exhilarating.
Summed it up for me too. I think that the three of us just kept looking at each other, and thinking about Jim Smith too. So yeah, I don't know what else to add because he just summed it up.
And then I was like, how far is this parade?
Thank you so much. And we are right about 1 minute till 3:00. So I just want to thank you for this wonderful, amazing, couldn't be better conversation. I wish we had 2-3 hours to continue. But we do want to open it up to maybe 1, maybe 2 questions, if anybody has.
Mark, we're just going to have you on the mic so we could hear it here on Facebook. Here you go, sir.
Hey, guys. Thanks for joining us again. I know the St. Patrick's Parade was hell to get finally on board with. 4th of July Parade, you've been involved with that for several years marching, correct? What was that experience like? Was it just, hey, we want to apply, we're in, we're done? Was it like that?
Very welcoming, by the way. We've applied every year, no problem. Great. We're happy the Pride Center is going to participate. People clap. It's very welcoming going down. Believe it or not, it's just a total different experience.
It's not just the 4th. I remember when Staten Island used to have the Columbus Day Parade, the Pride Center marched in that as well. So it's not like it's just the St. Patrick's Day Parade. There was the Columbus Day Parade, the 4th of July Parade. Any parade that we're allowed to march in, we'll be there.
Brian's over there. We go Tracy, and then Brian.
So you were talking about the parade. So, and I was there, and I saw the tears in all of your eyes. But what would it take, do you think, that we're going to see one parade? What would it take to have that one inclusive parade and not two?
That's a great question for the Hibernians.
True. I think, we've always been open to dialogue and talking about it. Unfortunately, they have not been receptive to dialogue, and I can only hope that that the other Hibernians saw what happened last year and go to certain people and say enough, because it was a fantastic day, a fantastic parade. So
I just like to add that I think that the whole situation with the Staten Island St. Patrick's Day Parade speaks to a wildly outsized source of power that a very small committee has. It's really crazy, and we could get into the saga of this back and forth and how many powerful people have tried to get this man to change his mind, and his heels are so dug in at this point. It's just insane, and I think that it really just speaks to the necessity of community to come together around this, right? So I think what it's going to take is the parade, the new St. Patrick's Day Parade, as I'm dubbing it, the real St. Patrick's Day Parade, is going to grow in size and to continue to grow. And the more organizations don't march in the exclusionary one, then less money the exclusionary one is able to raise, and those things, eventually they won't be able to have their parade. And it is so unfortunate that it's coming to that, because a very simple solution would be letting us march. So I think that, as Carol said, the people because it's not all Hibernians on Staten Island. It's a committee of five people, right? Right. And so it's a very small group that have a lot of outsized power. So I think that as we continue this march, they're going to lose that outsized power.
You've all told so many positive stories about Staten Island, and it makes us feel good. But, I'd like to see if you could comment on the national level, because we know where we are as a nation. And Carol, you said something at the very beginning of this that really struck me, because it's something that I feel, that people now are emboldened to show their hate. And that's something that I think has always been under the underbelly of Staten Island as well, frankly. But, no matter who's elected in this next election, do you think we're going backwards as a nation?
So I love this question. I think that homophobia, transphobia, hate towards the LGBT community is an electoral strategy. I think that it is geared at getting at people's innermost fears and taking them and riling people up about them so that a minority of people can hold on to power. It is not popular across the nation to be anti-queer. It is not popular to be anti-trans. It is just not popular. But a subset of people have realized that if they rile up a small but mighty and organized group of people around this, they can really make electoral gains with that. And it's really disgusting, and it's really horrifying, and it's incumbent on the media, and it's incumbent on people to challenge that and really meet that, not with both sidesisms, but the truth of the matter. Carol highlighted suicide rates among LGBT people. That is not a one, maybe yes or maybe no. That is a fact. That is a statistic and a fact. And I think that we need to meet the the fear mongering and lies that are told about our community with truth, honesty, love, and relentlessness to undercut that that power that homophobia, transphobia, and hate towards our community has around our electorate.
I think we are in dangerous times, and I think LGBTQ plus rights are, everything's fair game right now. And I think Clarence Thomas pointed it out in one of his decisions that, same-sex marriage, why is that even protected? I think everything is on the chopping block. And to Casey's point, it's the fear-mongering. It's, if you look for a scapegoat, you will find one. But what's really disheartening on the national level is the portrayal of the community. We're being portrayed as groomers, as indoctrinators, pedophiles, and mutilating children. Like some of the rhetoric that's coming out politically for personal gain is beyond the pale, and it really is unacceptable. And as allies, it's not just our job, but as allies, it is your job as well, not just as media, but in your personal lives, to point out, look at Titone. Do you really think he's been groomed? I mean, nobody groomed me. Nobody indoctrinated me. And when people say, well, I'm not homophobic, well, check that. Check that. Are you sure about that? Because if you're then using the word sexual preference in a sentence, you might be homophobic. And remember, being gay for me, it's innate. It's innate to who I am. It's like I did not have a choice to be born right-handed. It's just who I am. And people need to start thinking about, sexuality in those terms of being innate to the person biologically. Left-handed, right-handed, gay, straight, whatever. But I think we are in very dangerous times, Brian, and it's going to be vigilant. And it's not just the LGBTQ plus community that is on the chopping block or, is fair game. It's all of us, because if they come for one, they're coming for all of us.
Yeah, I would also add that right now there have been over 620 anti-LGBTQ bills that have been introduced. This year, up to this point, halfway through the year, this is the 5th year in a row that number has grown exponentially year over year on the number of bills that have been introduced. Most of those, by the way, fall under education, which is very scary, and of course, healthcare. And so, yeah, I think if one court case right now were to be overturned, respect for marriage would be reversed. And I try to educate people. Right now, I'm married to my wife, no matter what state I go into. But if respect for marriage is overturned, the states determine if my marriage is legal. So if I go from New York to New Jersey, all the things that, a heterosexual couple a married couple take for granted as far as rights goes right out the door. And so I think people need to understand the impact of each one of these bills that are coming at us, because I'm not looking for more, I'm looking for equal. And that's what it's about.
And Carol hit it right on the head to demonstrate where we're at. And we talked about, healthcare services and talking about children. Remember, when they're talking about cutting healthcare services for trans kids, they're talking about cutting mental health services. They're talking about forcing children into conversion therapy, which we know, number one, is a lie and does more harm than anything else in the world. You cannot force someone to be left-handed if they're born right-handed. So be vigilant, and as allies, as friends, you're doing a great job, but we need more. We need more from our friends.
Sure. We're 10 minutes over. and we don't care. We're happy to do it. We had a great discussion. I'm so happy that all three of you took this time to speak with us and all of us learning a little something today, which is really what it's all about. Please, a round of applause for our three panelists. And as always, we shout out Jason Pateron behind the scenes and the camera, setting up the whole thing here today. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Very much. You only got to clap 2 more times. Our advanced leadership out here today, Brian, Gail, Caroline, thank you so much. And thank you so much to Dr. Gracelyn Santos out here putting this whole thing together. Thank you so much again, Gracelyn. I'm going to leave her with the final words before we sign out.
Oh, we are thrilled to have had this happen today. I'm so grateful to Carol Bullock, Judge Matthew Titone, and Casey Henkins. Thank you so much, Shane, for everything that you do. As I always say, they tune in for Shane and they stay for the content. So thank you very much for spending the afternoon with us, and I hope to see you soon. And thank you.
It's a wrap, guys.
Thank you.